Ladies, gentlemen, and paladins of all ages, this brand new class is still fresh as hell, and the more that we play it, the more we find out about just how silly some parts of it actually are, and how they can be used to just pump the damage numbers up in ridiculous ways. Today I want to specifically focus on the speed farming setup that I have been using, as well. Pure unstoppable power is of course great, that is the end goal, and it's always nice to have something to bridge that gap and make getting there a little bit smoother. That said, this build has been crushing through to Torment 4 and then some, and I don't even have an ancestral version of the unique weapon yet, just a regular 750 item power one, which is a pretty large jump in damage output even by itself that I'm missing, and even outside of that, most of my gear is far from perfect, just the best of what I could find with the stats that I was looking for. That said, this is the Brandish Arbiter speed farming setup. It smashes a very large portion of the screen with every hit, the hits pierce enemies and then return back to you in our setup, which makes it actually just hit twice, which then makes it an absolute monster in mob clearing, and if you stand directly on top of an enemy, like an elite or a boss, they'll be hit by multiple projectiles at the same time, which all adds damage up a ton and makes it really solid at single target boss type scenarios too. That said, I'll go through the build as concisely as I can and try not to drone too deeply into stuff that isn't overly important right now, but with Paladin being a brand new class, there will be terms and synergies that need a bit more explaining than most of our build guides do, and while I could just show you the things that I take and choose and that's it, just end it there, that will only help you so much. I'd rather just actually show you why I pick the things that I do so you can use that knowledge to change the build in ways that fit your own playstyle and make your own builds based on the same sort of concepts. As we dive in here, I need to point out that an immense amount of power for Paladin comes from your Paragon board. We have 3 specific Paragon nodes that are absolutely busted strong, and without any of them the class feels somewhat weak in endgame, but if you lean into them hard enough you can make almost any build really be functional in endgame. But of course, the better the build behind it, the better the end results, and long term these things, especially the main one in the castle node here, which is an uncapped, massive, multiplicative general damage scaler, this will only grow and get bigger and bigger if I had better, more perfected equipment than I did right now. And currently this is making me do around 15 times the damage I would do without it, and this is out of combat, so it gets even crazier when the action is actually going down. That said, one last thing to note is that this build is going to be built around the Brandish basic skill, and to make it work properly as a build, you do need one required unique. Before you have that unique, you can play this build very similarly with Blessed Hammer instead of Brandish, and changing out our basic attack boosters to be hammer related boosters instead. But it's all very similar concepts and playstyle, just the Brandish version hits larger areas per hit and also does more single target damage overall. Let's get into the meat of it then and dive into the skill tree. Our basic skill today is going to be Brandish, of course, as we just talked about. It's very important as is the main sort of damage source in our build, so we take all 5 ranks of this. It fires an arc of light forward out of your weapon, then the force enhancement for this makes it pierce through enemies with that arc projectile, and then returning light is the ideal one that we're choosing here, as it makes it return back into you boomerang style and hit the enemy a second time, essentially doubling the damage. Sword of Mastery is another option here, and on the skill tree, if you look at the numbers that it presents, it seems like it would be more effective, but for whatever reason, when you use Sword of Mastery, it just does not achieve the same results as returning light. The double hit just feels way more consistent in actual practice. Sword of Mastery feels alright in the training room, but returning light in actual combat feels way better. That said, we also take a second basic skill here, which is Advanced. We only take 1 rank in it because we don't care about the actual damage that it does, and we don't actually need to lower the cooldown. And by the way, it has a cooldown because the only reason we care about this is the Flash of the Blade enhancement. This makes Advanced become a disciple skill with a cooldown, and it also makes it be more of a movement skill that applies vulnerable to any enemy that it hits, which is quite good. The vulnerable, of course, very nice. It's nice to have ways of applying vulnerable as a debuff. It makes things take more damage, but then also the fact that it becomes a disciple skill with a cooldown is perfect for our oath choice. We're taking the disciple oath, and this makes it so when you cast a disciple skill with a cooldown, it grants Arbiter for 4.5 seconds. Arbiter form is something that we're going to be building around here, mostly because of this oath choice, giving us 50% multiplicative increased damage with disciple skills in Arbiter form. Our main skill is a disciple skill, and so if we have that 50% increased damage all the time, that's obviously a very big increase, and so it's a very good thing to sort of focus for, and having more sources of ways to enter Arbiter form is a really good idea. This isn't necessarily something that you will need forever to be able to maintain Arbiter form permanently. Once you have enough cooldown reduction, you can do it purely through our other skill that we'll get to later, but this makes it easier to bridge the gap, and even then, it is a second movement skill, which again, this is a speed farming focused build, so I like having a second movement skill, and it's a nice source of vulnerable application when you need it too. Then for the core skills, we don't actually take a single core skill, but we do take passives here, and they are very important passives. 3 ranks in On Guard. This just provides you literally % increased armor and % increased block chance. This is quite possibly the most important node on the entire skill tree as far as things that you want to be able to get as extra ranks. You can do this with defensive tempers. There is an On Guard temper that you can put on your gear, and it's very, very important because we have ways, like I mentioned earlier, the Castle Legendary Paragon node. It scales just infinitely. There is no cap on it, and the more armor you have, the more damage you get. So being able to scale this multiplier up is just more armor that you can put into that. Also, there is a node that does the same thing for block chance. It isn't uncapped because the cap of block chance is 100%, but with this node pumped up this way for the armor already, you basically are going to be guaranteed to hit 100% block chance, which maximizes that node out too. Then we also have 3 ranks in the Riposte passive. Blocking grants you 18% multiplicative damage for 5 seconds. Again, we're going to have 100% block chance, so you're just going to have this active permanently pretty much. Then we're going to be down to the Aura section. We're going to be taking 2 skills here, which are quite important ones too. Fanaticism Aura. This gives you attack speed and critical strike chance when you spend Faith, but we're not going to be spending Faith, so we're not going to be getting that part from that section specifically. Instead, we've got the extra maximum resource from it passively. We've got the fact that we can weaken enemies when we use the active, which is nice because it reduces their damage and activates our weaken-based skills as well. And then Rite of Vengeance here is the enhancement that we take, and it makes it so any critical hits will trigger the attack speed and critical chance gain, not only spending Faith, so we actually do get to benefit from that effect due to this. Then we're also going to be taking Defiance Aura. This gives us just passively a massive increase in armor and All Resist. The All Resist is great for survivability, the armor is great for survivability, but again, the armor is great for that Castle Paragon legendary node, which is oh so important. Stacking armor is like the best way to scale your damage as a paladin right now. Then we take the enhancement here, of course, which also gives us maximum life, just 10% bonus as a passive, and Rite of Might. Whenever we get a stack of Resolve, we will increase our damage by 10% multiplicative for 4 seconds. Our ultimate is going to just be giving us stacks and stacks of Resolve over and over and over, so that just becomes guaranteed for the duration of the ultimate. Then we're going to be moving on to our next section here, which is the Valor skills. Valor skills are quite important, especially because we're going to be taking Falling Star. This is a Disciple cooldown skill, so will activate Arbiter form for us, and it is also a movement skill, which can move essentially like Soar for Spiritborn or Teleport for Sorcerer, but with a bit of a delay on it. And we mostly just use this to maintain Arbiter form as much as possible, but the movement part of it is great too, because you're going to be spamming it pretty much on cooldown as much as you can to stay in the form. The enhancement here makes it so when you kill a vulnerable enemy, you reduce the cooldown by 1 second. This makes it even more consistent when you're doing just general mobbing content, but obviously you want to get it to a point where you don't need to rely on this because of bosses, which might not have ads to kill. Then we also have Free Fall, and this just gives you an additional charge. The additional charge means that you can be recharging one use of the skill while you still have one available to you, and that just makes a really nice sort of comfortable cycling for maintaining Arbiter form. We also take some passives in this cluster too. 3 ranks of the best offense for increased damage while fortified, 3 ranks of fortitude for 18% crit strike damage while fortified as well. Then we go down here to the Justice section over here, and in here we just take a bunch of passives, like a whole load of passives and nothing else. 3 ranks of Righteousness is just increased holy and fire damage, which is lovely. Cracking the armor is 18% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, again, lovely. High Charity is 12% cooldown reduction. Cooldown reduction is like the main thing that we really need to be able to maintain permanent Arbiter form, so having high cooldown reduction is great, and this just gives us an easy way to get some more. 3 ranks of Iron Sharpens Iron is just bonus crit damage, obviously very good. Press the Advantage is 9% damage reduction for 5 seconds after a crit. We should be critting very frequently, so this should be permanently active. 3 ranks of Heavyweight, which is increased crit damage while healthy. Obviously you won't always be healthy, but especially because this is a speed farming build, you should usually be healthy, so this will usually be active. Then Break the Line, 3 out of 3. We have 6% increased crit strike damage and 15% increased damage against weakened enemies, which specifically interacts with the Fanaticism Aura's active. Then we go on to the next cluster, which is the Ultimate cluster, and here we're going to be taking Fortress. You might expect that we might take an Arbiter of Justice, but we don't need to, because we will be permanently in Arbiter form from the rest of our abilities. So instead we can use our Ultimate for another purpose, which is survivability and burst damage. What Fortress does here is make us become immune for 3 seconds after we cast it, and creates a defensive aura around us for 8 seconds after that. When we stand inside a Fortress, we get 2 resolve stacks every half a second, which then activates the damage bonus that we get from Defiance Aura, which is lovely. Then we get the enhancement, which makes our skills free to cast when we're inside, which isn't actually that big of a deal, but we do gain 4% damage per stack of resolve. You gain 4 stacks per second, which essentially means that you will have 16% after 1 second. After 2 seconds, you'll have 32% increased damage, and you will only lose any of that damage if you actually sustain a hit and lose a stack of resolve. Then we take the barricade enhancement. Killing enemies inside of the fortress extends its duration by half a second up to 20 seconds. None of these are really all that impactful for what we are specifically trying to do here. This one is the most likely to have benefit in case you use it in a fight that does have adds. Also, you can use this to recast fortress and move it, which is actually extremely useful because otherwise you're just sort of stuck to that circle that it places down. Then we take some passives here as well. We're going to be taking 3 ranks of Master Craftwork for armor increased by a massive amount of our shield's block chance. Again, we'll have 100% shield block chance, so this is just 150% armor. Then we take 1 rank in Shining Armor entirely just so that we can access Giant Slayer for 3 ranks. You deal increased damage to elites and increased damage to healthy enemies. This will stack, so if it's a healthy elite, it does a lot of extra damage. Then finally we have our key passive over here, and we're going to be taking Coat of Arms. Your damage is increased by 75% of your armor percent and 50% of your block chance. In normal situations, you might expect that Exaltation would be it, because during Arbiter, your damage goes up by an 85% multiplier. But once you stack enough armor and block chance, because we are doing those things anyways, this becomes a larger multiplier at 114%. So this is just more valuable overall, and that pretty much just does it for our skill tree. That's everything there. Just to go over it again, we are using the Disciple Oath here just to give us permanent Arbiter form and the increased damage for Disciple skills while we're in it. The Wing Strikes doesn't really matter for us here, that's not what we're scaling, but it is a nice sort of extra bonus too. That said, Arbiter form does give us increased movement speed. It gives us a special evade, which by the way, does not get neutered by the Juggernaut legendary aspect. If you have the Juggernaut legendary aspect, it increases your evade cooldown like so, but if you're in Arbiter form, it increases it much less. Look at that. It's a 2-second cooldown with Arbiter form evade with the Juggernaut aspect, which increases your evade cooldown by a massive amount. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to point out here as far as an interaction that's great for an armor stacking focused class anyways. As said, next up let's talk about our gear, and we're going to start with uniques here. This is the only required unique to make this build work. This is the Brandish focused unique. It makes Brandish unleash in all directions and increases its damage by an absolutely massive amount. The affixes on it are incredible. A chance for Brandish to deal double damage, of course, makes it very viable, but then it also has bonus ranks to Brandish on it. It has basic attack speed, which is great. It has basic skill damage specifically, which is a nice thing to scale in itself, and then also strength, which is lovely too. On this, the specific affix that you would ideally hit with your masterworking greater affix thing that happens at the end, the capstone upgrade, would be Brandish skill ranks. I have mine on deal double damage because I don't have an ancestral weapon, but on an ancestral weapon, it is much better to do Brandish skill ranks because the chance to deal double damage can overcap otherwise. And yes, I am very lucky on the Sanctify on this item, with it being an extra 4 basic skill ranks just on top of that too. Then for our other uniques that I've got running here, Rakanoth's Wake is not required, but in a world where resistance to all elements feels very important right now, and the fact that otherwise we are just completely stacking armor as much as physically possible, having a really big source of all element resist is very nice, and these also come with a good chunk of cooldown reduction, which is of course relevant to the build too, and that is very nice as well. It makes you explode for a pop damage when you use a cooldown, which is just a little tiny bonus bit of damage. It really doesn't help us all that much. It also gives us non-physical damage, and all of our damage is non-physical, so that is quite good, and the movement speed increase is nice too. As for the actual thing that you want to hit your capstone affix upgrade on for the masterworking, non-physical damage is ideal for pure damage. Otherwise, if you need more cooldown reduction, obviously cooldown reduction. If you need more survivability, then the resistance to all elements would be an ideal hit as well. Then what we're also going to have is our final unique. This one is also not required. You can just use any shield with a damage boosting aspect on it, but the Herald of Zakarum unique shield is just absolutely fantastic if you do have it. And while this does have a greater affix on it, that's from Sanctification. This is again not an ancestral item for me. What this does then is it gives you percentage increased strength, resistances, armor, and retribution chance. The retribution chance isn't relevant to this build, but the resistances and the armor are great for survivability, but also the armor for stacking through the Castle Paragon legendary node is just unbelievably strong. The strength on top of that just increases skill damage in general, so this is just an extremely good item, and it comes with a bunch of bonus armor on it, and I also managed to masterwork and greater affix upgrade the armor through the Sanctification system so that it has nearly 800 armor just from that part itself, not even the part where there's the default armor on the shield too. So this shield for me is is 1800 worth of armor stats, which is sort of nuts. That said, we got the rest of our items as well. The legendaries, of course, the most important slot is going to be your amulet, on which we have the Ascension legendary aspect. Casting a skill that grants Arbiter form increases your damage by a set amount, stacking up to 10 times. These stacks are lost when you leave Arbiter form. So essentially, as long as your cooldown on your Arbiter entering skills is lower than the duration of Arbiter form, which is 4.5 seconds, you can keep Arbiter active permanently. If you can keep Arbiter form active permanently and you keep stacking these things, my version of this aspect would give me up to 165% multiplicative increased damage, and I can do this regularly because of my cooldown reduction. As for the actual stats on the amulet itself, the ideal ones are the attack speed, crit chance that I've got here, and then some passives would be great. Cooldown reduction, if you need more, can roll on the amulet and it's not a bad place for it, or just some raw strength for some more damage increase. Then for the temper on this one, you want the defensive temper for bonus ranks to on guard. We talked about it earlier. On guard is more armor and more block chance, but the armor is the thing that we really care about, so as many ranks of this as possible is extremely strong for this class. Then on our ring, we've got the Holy Punishment aspect here. This is increased holy and fire damage by 63% on the version that I have. Everything that we do pretty much is holy damage. It's a little bit fire in some places too, but mostly it's holy damage, which means that this increases most of our damage by a very high amount, especially the parts that we actually care about, like Brandish. As for the actual stuff on this, I've got Disciple damage as the tempering affix here. We've got cooldown reduction on the ring because that's a place where that can now be. Crit chance is great, max life is great, strength is great. This ring was a fantastic drop that I got, and I don't think I'll ever get this lucky again. Then on my other ring, I've got the adaptability aspect. This is a basic skill focused build. This makes us deal more damage with our basic skill for every point of primary resource we have. We only have 100 right now, but that means that we're dealing 46% increased damage, which is a very good multiplier from this ability. Then past that, again, cooldown reduction on the ring is a great source of it. Maximum life, crit chance, attack speed, strength, all of those things are absolutely fantastic, and the tempering affix is going to be disciple damage on all of our offensive slots, as we already talked about with the previous ring. Then on the gloves, we've got the Moonrise aspect, the other basic skill boosting thing, and this just gives us a ton of extra attack speed more than anything else, as well as 41% increased basic skill damage. I have a very low roll on this one, but it is still quite good to have. That said, crit chance, attack speed, cooldown reduction is also available on gloves now. Armor is pretty much a requirement because you need flat armor in as many slots as you can for the ability to stack the Castle Paragon node, and then strength is quite good too, of course. Then on the helmet, we have the Disobedience aspect for stacking armor during combat to get to even higher levels. We've got armor on this as well, of course. We've got cooldown reduction on the helmet as well because we're stacking cooldown reduction as much as we can. Strength is great. And then I would probably rather have maximum life than the Fortified Generation that I've got on there currently. And of course, we're using the On Guard Temper affix too. That's going to be on all of our defensive pieces just to get that out of the way. Then on our chest piece, we have the Juggernaut aspect for increased flat armor, so that gets increased by all of our percent armor increases very nicely. But our evade has 100% increased cooldown, which doesn't matter all that much because our cooldown reduction stacking makes our regular evade not too bad, and the Arbiter form evade again just has a ridiculously short cooldown just in general, even through this trying to power it down. Then we have on this strength, maximum life, resistance to all elements, and then I got all stats replacing one of my stats from the sanctification, which sort of sucks, but you know, it is what it is. It is a nice pile of all stats. And that said, you could run armor instead of the all element resistance if you want more damage, but if you need a bit more survivability, I'd recommend replacing a little bit of armor with a little bit of extra resistance, essentially. Then for our final piece here, we have the legs, on which the final aspect is the Indomitable aspect. This gives us up to 130% bonus armor and apparent resistances based on our block chance. Currently, we get 225% from this, so you know, we've got good block chance, we've got good armor, and the good armor translates to a bunch of extra damage too. As for the affixes on this one, bonus ranks to Brandish specifically would be ideal. I got bonus ranks to basic skills, which is the second best option there. Resistance to all elements, fantastic again. Armor, and then strength. You could opt for maximum life increase instead of strength if you want more survivability, but strength for just pumping pure damage. That does it for all of the gear itself, so let's talk about the gems and the rune words. For the gems, real fast, diamonds in your jewelry is great. All resist is sort of what you want to focus on for your resistances because it just is very well balanced this time around in Season 11. In your armor gem slots, other than the rune words, of course, you're going to want rubies because those will give you strength, which is our main stat. In your weapon gem slot, you will want vulnerable damage from the sapphires, because vulnerable is something that we can pretty consistently apply with the way that we're set up, and that increased damage is fantastic too. On that note, it is worth mentioning that you could roll for a chance to apply vulnerable damage as one of the affixes on your rings, just to make vulnerable even more reliable, but it is still pretty good the way that we have it set up now. That said, inside of your actual runeword slots then, they're not perfected quite yet, but this one I've got Moni Gar, which is cast 2 mobility skills, get an extra crit chance for 5 seconds afterwards. We are going to be absolutely spamming Falling Star, which is a mobility skill. We've turned Advanced into a mobility skill, and we're going to be using that frequently too, so this is just pretty frequent access to a bunch of extra crit chance that we can get in this build, and crit chance is a great way to scale your damage through, obviously, crit damage. Then for our other rune word, this one is definitely not ideal. Currently I have it as Back Thule. We want the Thule invoking Sorceress Mystical Frost Nova skill and inflicting vulnerable onto enemies. This is probably our most consistent way to apply vulnerable in this setup, but this isn't the actual thing to be using it with. Instead, I would rather use Igni, which is the rune that gives you just a stored offering gain over time, and then you activate it by using a non-basic skill. It's just a really efficient generator that we can use to apply the freeze, and more importantly, the vulnerable a lot more frequently too. That said, let's just go into the Divine Gifts really quickly too. They don't really affect our power this season that much, but the Andariel Essence of Anguish gives us bonus movement speed, which is nice. The Essence of Lies Belial upgrade in the Purified slot gives us 4 to 5 per second, which is also nice, but the really important one is the Essence of Sin from Azmodan, which gives us 20% increased armor. I'll say it a million times if I have to. Armor is a very important way of scaling damage in this build. Obviously, you can gain even more armor if you level it up more. Mine is not very leveled, but this is just the base version essentially, and 20% armor is very, very valuable. Then on our mercenaries, we've got Rahir as our actual active mercenary. We do this so that we can go down the right side track specifically for Rahir's Aegis for the survivability from this. If your survivability feels fine, if you don't feel like you need 15% extra all res, you can go down the left side for 15% armor instead, but 15% armor compared to everything else we're doing is somewhat minor at this stage, and you're probably going to be lacking all resist because of all of the armor stacking that we're trying to do instead, so that is worth pointing out. Then for our reinforcement, we've got Variana here, and we're going to be using Variana with Bloodthirst to give us extra attack speed, as attack speed is just damage in this setup. Of course, it isn't any setup, but even more so in this one, as we'll get into on the Paragon board. And then we've got this set to cast anytime that we use a skill in combat. Then finally, let's go over our Paragon board for the day, and this one is going to be very bare bones from what I've got right now. Essentially, the first thing you want to do with Paladin's Paragon board is just run through and grab every legendary node that we're going to be going through here, because the legendary nodes for Paladin are absolutely fucking nuts, and getting them is more important than doing anything else on the board, even having glyphs in the slots. It's not worth having glyphs in the slots if you have not reached your legendary nodes, because not a single glyph is worth more than what the actual legendary nodes are worth for us. That said, my board looks like this because I did exactly that. I'm only at like 100 Paragon, but as we fill it out, I would change the rotation of these. I would repath a little bit to get the glyph sockets a bit more efficiently. This is just the path that you need to get the most efficient path to get to the legendary nodes we want. That said, from the starting board, we go up the right side here, up through the Brawn legendary node. I don't actually have the better glyph for the first board yet, which would be Spirit, as this is just critical strike damage increase and increased damage for every critical strike that you get, and that is obviously just a nice multiplicative extra bit of damage on an enemy. Instead, for now, I've just got the Challenger glyph in here. Then we go up the right side through the extra damage to Elite's node here and connect on the Castle Paragon board. We go directly up and over to the Castle node itself, which is super duper important, giving us extra damage for every bit of armor that we have. And again, this scales infinitely, and it scales very, very well for the new way that the armor system works too. Right beside this is a rare and magic node cluster for a bunch of total armor and total resistances, so obviously take that. That's very valuable, and it's right there. Then we go at the left side of the board here to get the Relentless Paragon board, and we again go directly to the legendary node in the most direct way possible. And what this does is literally any time that you move, for 2 seconds after as well, you get an 80% damage multiplier and 30% cooldown reduction. The cooldown reduction is, of course, very important. We've talked about cooldown reduction a bunch already. The increased damage is a massive multiplier, and it is extremely easy to move once every 2 seconds. You'll probably be doing that by default without even thinking about it, but of course this does mean that you should think about it a little bit. Make sure you never stand completely still for this exact reason. Then we go through another total armor increasing rare node cluster to get over to the bottom board exit, and on this one we're going to be attaching the Shield Bearer Paragon board. Ideally this would be your 5th board, because we don't care about the rare nodes on this one quite as much as we do the other ones, but if you want the legendary node, you will want it as soon as possible, so I recommend putting on 4th to begin with. That said, path right to the legendary node, you deal increased damage equal to 110% of your block chance. This is 110% multiplier when you have 100% block chance, which is obviously a very big damage multiplier, and it is very, very useful. Then the final board that we're going to be taking today is going to be Divinity. We deal 90% multiplicative increased damage to vulnerable enemies, which is extremely powerful because it applies when we're in Arbiter form, and we will be in Arbiter form permanently. We'll also be making enemies vulnerable as frequently as possible, so this is just an extremely potent upgrade. That said, I've not even got the Paragon nodes to actually pick this one up yet myself, but that would be the next thing that I do. And again, it goes through another total armor and maximum life increasing sort of cluster here, which is a very, very valuable one. There is arguably a better legendary node board, but the other legendary node board does not have anywhere close to as good as the clusters that are on this one as far as the just general rare and magic nodes as well, so it makes it a much better board as a whole, and the legendary power is still extremely good from this board too. That said, as far as the other things that I would have in here, inside of this board here, the castle board, I have the Resplendence glyph. What this does is increase the bonus to all magic nodes within range, but also the additional bonus, once I have it active of course, is after casting an aura skill, the active cooldown of every non-aura skill is reduced by 2 seconds. So essentially another form of cooldown reduction that does not attribute to the same sort of cap that cooldown reduction have, which is very useful. Then on the other boards, I don't even have these glyphs yet, but I would want the Apostle glyph. This gives you increased disciple skill damage and increased disciple skill damage against vulnerable enemies. Both of those are of course extremely relevant to us as well. We would want the Canny glyph because most of our damage, in fact all of our damage, is non-physical damage, so increased non-physical damage is just increased damage for us just as a whole. Then we would also want the Honed glyph here, which is more increased crit damage, and we generate faith when we critically strike, which isn't relevant to us, but the increased crit damage is of course something that we can scale quite well in the final Paragon board when you have all those extra points that you're just sort of shoving things in around glyphs. And that pretty much does it for actually putting the build together as a whole. So to quickly go over how to play it, open combat with Falling Star to enter Arbiter form and start that cooldown cycling. If your cooldown reduction is potent enough, you can literally just spam that on cooldown and you will never leave Arbiter form. Otherwise, weave in an advance between to extend the duration. Use Defiance aura and Fanaticism aura essentially on cooldown, though try to space them out slightly, just a little bit for our Paragon node triggers. Then Brandish is your main bread and butter damage, and save Fortress for big gold health bar elites or for bosses specifically where you will most need its survivability and damage increase options. Honestly, that's pretty much it. Just keep an eye on Arbiter form timer beside your faith gauge, but otherwise it's very simple. That just about does it for today then everyone. A complete breakdown of our Brandish Arbiter speed farming Paladin build, and I've been having a great time with this one myself, so I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy using it for yourselves in the game too. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.